Hey everyone, welcome to Car and Driver. I'm Carlos Lago.
And I'm Dan Edmunds.
And we're here to talk about Dan's experience driving at Lightning Lap this year, which is going to be interesting for a few reasons, because this was Dan's first experience driving at Lightning Lap, but certainly not his first experience on track with a car, right?
Right. No, not at all.
Give us a little bit of your background.
Well, it starts really early. My dad was a professional race car driver, even drove at the Indy 500 and was Rookie of the Year in 1957. So yeah, I grew up in that environment, working at his race shop, which he opened after he retired, and meeting all kinds of race car drivers. And then that led to me going to engineering school and getting a mechanical engineering degree. By that time, he closed the shop, so I didn't take it over for him, which might have been a possibility at one point. But I instead got a job with the Department of Defense in San Diego, which is weird because, I'm on the West Coast and there just wasn't a lot of automaker development going on at the time. Anyway, one of my buddies at work was racing in the Rabbit Bilstein Cup, and I started crewing for him. And I thought, well, I'm going to get myself a car. So then I started racing in improved touring and showroom stock, and that was like a GTI and a second-gen CRX, a Civic Si, and finally a Mazda Miata, which is kind of when I ran out of steam, got a wife and a mortgage, and that kind of put paid to my racing career, although I dabble now and again.
Now and again, and Lightning Lap's a great opportunity for that. So you got a background in mechanical engineering, suspension design, and quite an extensive history on the racetrack. Let's see how that comes together in your laps, right?
Right.
At VIR. So the first car was the 2022 Subaru WRX. What are you thinking going into this?
I just didn't really know what to expect because this track was, completely new to me. I've only driven I guess the bottom half. I don't know if I guess it's the northern half now that I look at the map. And, turned right at the, just after the snake, never got to the climbing S's. So most of this track is completely new to me at this point. And, the WRX, did a great job once we got through me learning the track. It came with 3 sets of tires and some brakes, and I'd learned the track using the all seasons that it came with, figuring we won't use up the summers until I'm ready to go for time. And the thing about it is there's a lot of shifting here.
Yes.
Third, fourth, and I pop it into fifth right about there. And then it's into these climbing S's, and it skims the curbs really well because, the car has more suspension travel this year. And I'm also not one that's bashful about hitting curbs.
I noticed that when watching your lapping, and I was going to say that's probably tied to your experience doing suspension development. You know the exact limitations, maybe beyond, where you can put suspension through.
This one I might have kissed a little bit too hard there because, you got to put the power down coming out of the corner, but I couldn't resist.
Right.
But yeah, we're up, heading up the hill here in fourth and fifth again. And this braking point was always a little tricky for me. I was really surprised at how blind a lot of this is because, you have to get on the brakes before you can see your turn-in point here. And then, down 2 gears here, down into spiral. And then, of course, I couldn't hold third because they lowered the rev limit this year, so I had to pull it back into fourth and then go back down into third. That's kind of a nuisance downshift that just eats into a little bit of time. But the car's really composed, puts the power down well. I was really surprised, and now it's like trying to find the Michelin Man, which is the image on the bridge there, to turn into this section. But there's a nice rhythm here.
Yeah, it looks like it. And you're right in pointing out the lower red line and the closer gear ratios, because everybody's complaining about how this car looks and its performance, but very few people have talked about the lowered engine speed or max engine speed, and that really makes driving on track a bit more challenging because of all the shifting that you have to do, right?
Right, right. I mean, they crowded some of the gears closer together, which is actually good on the street. But on this particular track, especially on the infield, you know, I just would have liked to have been able to carry third gear a little bit more. And then, of course, here, this is another, you know, third, fourth, fifth gear acceleration. And yeah, it was a steady improvement throughout I have to say, I have to restrain myself from saying weekend because, you know, and when I go into a racetrack, it was always Friday as practice, Saturday as qualifying, and Sunday as race. And we were here for 3 days, and I could not shake myself of saying on Friday we did this, and it was like everybody's looking at me like, what are you talking about on Friday?
But ultimately, it was a pretty solid performance for the WRX, especially compared to the previous generation, where it picked up quite a significant amount of time, despite having the lower engine speed, but also had a lot of suspension improvements. And I think the time was close to, there was like a performance special of the previous generation WRX that had a lot of upgrades that would have benefited this car. So ultimately, that was a good lap time considering what you were working against, right? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I came within a tenth of the performance pack, and I know everyone was a little disappointed that I didn't beat last year's model, but the performance pack has like some real track-focused brake pads, and it has better seats, and that was one of the things I was fighting with, was staying in position and actually coming out onto the front straight, trying to pull, you know, a shift into fifth while I'm also trying to brace myself, or I guess that would have been the fourth. But anyway, those seats would have helped. And then, of course, that package also deletes the sunroof, which lowers the center of gravity a little bit. And to come within a tenth, and also the driver of that was no slouch.
Yeah.
And is somebody I respect quite a bit. So to be able to come within a tenth, despite all of that, you know, and I definitely could have used the brake pads here. We had to, you know, keep on top of that, and we were able to do that, but certainly track-focused brake pads are always useful.
For sure, for sure. Let's move on to the next vehicle that you had. That's the Volkswagen GTI. So this was a return contender this year. Previous year had a dual-clutch transmission. This one had a manual. But this one also wasn't without challenges. What happened?
Well, it basically arrived with one set of tires. So I basically left it parked the first day entirely and didn't really get into it until the afternoon of the second day because I really wanted to nail down what I thought the right line around the track was going to be. And I used the Subaru and its extra tires and brakes to do that. So by the time I got into this car, I had a pretty good idea of my way around the track, and I was also very interested to see that, you know, I only needed to switch gears 6 times between third and fourth.
Wow. Okay.
Which, you know, actually now that I think about it, I mean, I didn't really have a choice, but the gearing was pretty widely spaced. And I have a feeling that the dual clutch car from last year, they were a little tighter, and probably the car pulled better out of certain corners than this one did. But yeah, generally everywhere that the Subaru needed fifth, I could just keep this in fourth.
Provided the shifter actually stays attached, right?
What's that?
Provided the shifter actually stays attached, right?
Yeah. I think we can see that somewhere. Maybe not on this lap because I was being really careful on the money lap, but on some of the practice laps, on the 3/4 upshift, the shifter just came off in my hand. And I guess it's because it's got a snap-on shifter instead of a screw-on one, so it'll always be lined up for those people who would be bothered by 5-degree misalignment of the shift knob. But yeah, it's not like I was really yanking on the thing, but it's got this curved shape that just pulling it back actually imparts an upward force to it. And even because I cup the shifter, you know, I don't grab it, and it still just pulled off, and it was very surprising. Now here on my fast lap, right about here, we're about to see it. This is where I gave away 2/10. I went wide here, dropped 2 tires in the grass while I'm trying to put on the power. And I think on this lap, that probably cost me 2 or 3/10.
But you know
what? As it was,
we paid for the whole track. We're going to use the whole track.
That's my feeling. You know, and you know, there's a track limits rule, and as long as there's 2 wheels on the asphalt, you're good.
I cut you off though. What were you going to say?
I don't recall.
You did ultimately beat the time that we got out of the GTI last year though, so that has to feel good, right?
Yeah, it does, but I mean, obviously the goal was to beat the missing time, the elusive time that wasn't on the card because it didn't get pushed in properly. And I didn't, you know, I kind of struck the midpoint between the two, but I think, you know, I got to think that the 6-speed manual, even though everybody loves manuals and I love driving it, didn't have the tighter gear spacing of the DCT, and I think that might have held it back in a couple of places.
Yeah, absolutely, and you're not the only person who said that. You know, it was a similar situation. Basically, all the manuals that were here this year, there was a good amount of them, but yeah, those upshifts are always going to sap time, and in the places where you have to shift, especially if it's not a great position where you want to keep both hands on the wheel, that's going to slow you down too.
Yeah, definitely, and you know, that was the nice part. The infield run was just steady third. There was not really a hint of any shifting necessary there. Like, there was a lot of decision making going on in the Subaru and a lot of experimentation, but here it was just set it and forget it in third, and the only time I had to pull fourth was on the front straight, you know, climbing S's, the back straight. That was pretty much it, and then everything else was third.
Well, did you have a good time overall?
Oh yeah, it was great. That's an awesome track. I mean, you know, I didn't really know what to expect, but you know, it's like 2 tracks in one at least. You know, it's like a racetrack and an autocross.
Yeah.
Because, and then everything's blind. There's probably 4 or 5 blind corners there. I just really was really excited by the challenge, and I just wish it wasn't such a long tow from home, because it's not something that, you know, when I was doing my showroom stock racing, I ever would have visited, because I was strictly West Coast.
Yeah.
And paying for my own gas to get to tracks.
For sure. What are you looking forward to most next year?
Well, just more track time.
Right.
And the fact that when I get there, I'll have some idea where it goes. And so the first day won't be spent trying to learn the place, because I got to say that, you know, my first experience was behind Dave Beard. He goes, "Oh, I'll show you the way around the place." So I jumped in a car and I followed him. And I followed him for exactly 1 lap. And then he put the hammer down and I didn't see him. And so my second lap, I'm like almost running off in all these blind corners because it hadn't settled in yet, you know. Normally when I went to a racetrack that I hadn't seen before, you'd be in a session with 20 other cars and you could follow just about anybody to kind of get a feel for the place. And you also could figure out who the fast people were and who you didn't want to follow. But when there's just one other guy and he just, you know, just bolts off into the distance, it was like, well, I guess I'm on my own here.
You hear that, Dave? Well,
it's fine. No, I appreciate it, but yeah, it was pretty funny.
Well, thank you for giving your commentary over these laps. Definitely can't wait to see what we get next year. And thank you guys for watching this video. If you want to see more, be sure to check the links surrounding this video for more information about Lightning Lap, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.
And thanks for having me.